94% of Jews in Tsarist Russia lived in the Pale of Settlement, confined
Right?
there by a royal decree first issued by Catherine the Great in 1791. After the abolition of serfdom in 1863 and increased industrialization from the 1870s onwards, there was a process of social differentiation amongst the Jews.
Exactly.
Thousands of Jews were murdered in pogroms between 1881 and 1914 in the 2 weeks following the Tsar's Manifesto of October 1905. There were 690 pogroms in which 3,000 Jews were murdered. Tsarist finance minister Count Serge White regretted that he was unable to kill more.
Wit.
Wit.
Yeah. Go
Because
ahead.
Because of the intensity of the anti-Semitic persecution in the pogroms, which were orchestrated by the Tsarist regime, Jews were prominent in the revolutionary movement. It is
Right.
estimated that Jews accounted for some 25 to 30% of revolutionary activists in Russia between 1886 and 1889. In the principal area of revolutionary activity, the province in the south, some 35 to 40% of activists were Jewish. General Nikolai Shebeko, in his report on subversion from 1878 to 87, estimated that 80% of socialists in the south of Russia were Jewish, whereas Zionism appealed to the petty bourgeois. It was the ideas of socialism which won the allegiance of the Jewish proletariat because it alone fought anti-Semitism. The Vilna Social Democratic Group, formed around 1890, was the forerunner of the Bund, the General Jewish Workers' League in Russia and Poland. The Vilna Rabbinical Seminary had become a hotbed of socialist militants until the Tsarist police closed them down. The Bund, which was the largest Jewish party in the Pale, was formed in Vilna on the 7th or 9th of October of 1897, shortly after the First Zionist Congress. 13 delegates attended from Minsk, Bialystok, Warsaw, Vitebsk, and Vilna. Jewish workers were normally employed by the fellow Jews in small tailoring, shoemaking, and baking workshops that they themselves struggled to survive. By 1900, only 50,000 Jews were employed in factories. Zionism was born in the midst of this class war between the Jewish bourgeois and proletariat. The Bund was hostile to Zionism and claimed that the fledgling socialist Zionist groups were a red mask to hide their real intentions and to conform to the radical zeitgeist. Socialism, Socialist Zionism arose as a result of the conflict between the Zionist support for the existing order and the Jewish proletariat class interest. The Bund regarded Zionism as a nationalist diversion from the class struggle and the most evil enemy of the organized Jewish proletariat. The Bund, is that how you say it? The Bund?
Boomed.
The Bund. The Bund, which walked out of the Second Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party in 1903 over its right to represent all Jewish workers, first organized self-defense against the pogromists in Poland in August 1902, at the same time as the Russian Zionists were holding their illegally authorized conference in Minsk. There was no prohibition on Zionist activities, and an official permit was given for the holding of the Second Conference of Russian Zionists. The Kishinev pogrom of 19 and 20 April 1903 triggered off a second wave of pogroms. Nearly 50 Jews were killed and 92 were severely injured. No Jewish event of the time would be as extensively documented. Reports in the New York Times and the Times ensured that it had an unprecedented impact internationally. The attitude of the Zionist movement was epitomized by Chaim Nam Bialk, the Zionist national poet who wrote in the City of Killing of the disgraceful and shame and cowardice of the Jewish victims of the 1903 Kishinev pogrom. The Tsarist authorities refused to intervene except when the Jews defended themselves. The international press and the liberal press in Russia were outraged by stories of rape, mutilation, and the murder of children. The Bund organized self-defense units here and elsewhere. Gorbachev's claim that Pale Zion had organized self-defense groups at Passover 1901 in Yekaterinoslav was disputed, citing plans but nothing more. The governor of Bessarabia, whose capital was Kishinev, was replaced by Prince Serv Urosov, a sincere liberal who was a severe critic of autocracy. Urosov's study of the massacre confirmed that it had been instigated by Interior Minister Count Lasala von Flevo.
Flev.
What? Flev?
One Flev.
Von Flev. Excuse me. Herzl's response to the pogrom was to warn the leaders of Europe that if the Zionist project were to fail, hundreds of thousands of our adherents would at once swoop change over the revolutionary parties. In August 1903, barely 4 months after the Kishinev pogrom, Herzl visited Russia, meeting with Flev and Witt. Herzl was concerned that Zionism should retain its legal status. As he began explaining the merits of Zionism, Flev
Yeah.
interrupted him. You don't have to justify the movement to me. Vous faites un converti. You are preaching to a convert.
Yeah. Let me comment here
Yeah.
because what we're talking about is the pre-Nazi period, obviously, and the ideology and perspective of the Zionist movement in the 19th and early 20th century, and in Russia and so forth. That's necessary preamble. And of course, Lenny Brenner in his 51 documents goes into a lot, about half the book is the pre-Nazi period.
Yeah.
But interesting history as it is for the formation of the Zionist ideology and their preparation for joining Nazi Germany's project. Yeah, their perspective, the Zionists and the Jews and the Aryans need to separate and everything else. But what they actually did in the 40s, in the Holocaust, this is where they really fly their colors and disgrace themselves. And by extension, the guys we're talking about, the Gokeefs and Peters, have disgraced themselves because they know nothing of this history. They are kindergartners with big muscles, kindergartners with big muscles and no doubt an arsenal. They're so fucking stupid. And they have the gall to talk about the dumbing down the American. Well, yeah, there's a dumbing down the American people. But guess what? You're the fucking dumbest of the fucking dumb. Idiots. You want the mass extermination of communists, Jews and gypsies, disabled, and so on. Well, I got something for you. It's called a size 12 up your fucking ass.
Herzl promised that the revolutionaries would stop their struggle and return for a charter for Palestine in 15 years. The Bund were outraged. The Sixth Zionist Congress in 1903 remained silent about the pogroms, just as 30 years later in Prague it would remain silent about the Hitler regime.
Good point.
Kishinev created a crisis for the fledgling labor Zionist groups who realized that they could not ignore the struggle against anti Semitism. Herzl wrote to the Kaiser describing how our movement has everywhere to fight an embittered battle with the revolutionary parties which rightly sense an adversary in it. We are in need of encouragement, even though it has to be a carefully kept secret. In an interview with Lucien Wolf of the BOD, Flev spoke favorably of Zionism as an encouragement to Jewish immigration, although he began to fear that political Zionism was a chimera. For non immigrants, he thought that Zionist ideas might be useful as an antidote to socialist doctrines. 31 years later, Ben Gurion similarly described Zionism as a bulwark against assimilation and communism. The myth of Zionist socialism rested on the belief that the kibbutzim were socialist. In reality, the kibbutzim were the result of an alliance between the Zionist labor movement and the Zionist financial institutions. The socialism of the pioneers did not prevent them from entering into an alliance with the Jewish bourgeoisie.
Outstanding. Outstanding analysis. Yeah, I mean, and this is so important. As I say, in the Nazi, the formation of the ideology and perspective of the Zionist movement, completely anti proletarian, completely oriented towards not only the Jewish elite, but the international imperialist elites in the United States and so forth, or I mean in England, and so on and so forth. So yeah, they were. This is the, we'll get into the Balfour and these elites in England who were anti-Semitic. What the fuck is this anti-Semitic?
Yeah.
You fucking people think you're Christians? This is the joke. You're not Christians, whatever that means. You're not even close to whatever interpretation of whatever Christianity is supposed to be. This is just a logo that you stick on your lapel for political reasons, okay? And it's the same today. You think these Peters and whatever and O'Keefe are Christians? Whatever that means, they're not Christians.
Yeah.
They're fakes and frauds.
He's wearing a big cross.
Yeah, yeah, don't let me meet that guy, that O'Keefe, on the street somewhere, because you're going to be visiting me in the penitentiary. I guarantee you. I guarantee you that.
I'm
I want
surprised
you.
they haven't. I'm surprised they haven't had.
I'll smash his nose up into his fucking brain, and I'll go to jail for a long time. I'll do it. You don't believe me? I'm selling wolf tickets, as they used to say. Selling wolf tickets.
Yeah.
No, I would
I just took it.
my money kick his ass. What?
I just took a friend to jail, and it wasn't a very nice place.
No, I've been there, but no, it's not meant to be a good place. But that's
Yeah.
not my
Well,
point.
he
The
didn't
point
speak,
is,
he
I
didn't
would
speak
go
a
to
lot of
extreme
English.
measures against any of the people that produce this pro-Nazi crap. I would go to extreme measures. Probably, maybe. You want to go on with the reading?
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
suggest
What?
this is preparatory, as I mentioned, to the Nazi era itself. So you can get an idea how these early Zionists, Herzl, and those people were thinking. They were the Jewish elite, or hoped to be, and they were involved with negotiating with the imperialist powers. But when you get to the Nazi Holocaust in the beginning of the late 30s and into the war, the extent to which the Zionists went to prevent courageous Jews and communists from opposing these policies, these extermination policies, and the extent to which they went to facilitate them in the Judenrat. This is the governing bodies that the Nazis set up in all of these various ghettos. There are hundreds of them. And they were virtually all Nazis. And they all worked to register, earmark, and lead to the cattle cars to go to the east, to Treblinka and Auschwitz and all these places to be exterminated. And yes, these were extermination camps. So if you want to argue about numbers, yeah, I'm not going to argue about numbers. Hannah Arendt says 5 million. Uh, I think Greenstein says 5 million. But he's got the documentation about the hundreds of thousands in each country: Hungary, Romania, Poland, Germany, Soviet Union, uh, in the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Hundreds of thousands in each of those places. So if you want to quibble about the 6 million, well, you can have it.
Okay.
I'll give you that. Say it's for me. I'll
I'll
give it to
continue.
you.
I'll
Fuck
continue.
yourself.
I'll continue. The Kavutska, Kavutsa,
I
and
don't know what.
Kavutsa and Kibbutzim.
The kibbutz. The kibbutzim.
I
Yeah,
got that. I got the kibbutzim, but there's a kibbutz, whatever. Okay, emerged directly from the interaction between Rupin and the young immigrants from the second Aliyah. Collective
yeah.
colonization was the most efficient and most effective means of colonizing Palestine. They were not a means of changing society, they were tools in forging national sovereignty.
Good point.
They fooled Westerners like Hannah Arendt, who described them
Yeah.
as the most promising of all social experiments made in the 20th century.
Yeah. Idealist.
The internal social structure of the kibbutzim reflected their political role. Personal space was eliminated in favor of collectivism. They were a Zionist Sparta intended to produce fighters without personal attachments of affection to each other or their children. Everything was the property of the collective, including the individual's thoughts. The kibbutzim were Jewish-only stockade and watchtower settlements, marking out the borders of a future Jewish state. They provided the organizational backbone of Haganah, the pre-state army, and Palmach, the Zionist shock troops. Although never more than 5% of Israel's population, the kibbutzim produced a disproportionately high number of Israel's officer corps. Borokhovism, Marxist Zionism.
Yeah. Well, yeah, some fools. Go ahead.
The Marxist Zionists of Paul Zion, PZ, were followers of Barakov, who was expelled from the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party in May 1901 for supporting Zionism. PZ groups formed in various locations, beginning in Minsk in 1897 and Ekaterinozlov in 1901. A number of parties, such as the Zionist Socialist Labor Party, were formed under the banner of PZ. Barakov argued that the social structure of Jews living outside Palestine resembled an inverted pyramid: too many rich Jews at the top and too few Jews at the bottom. The class struggle can take place only where the worker toils. As long as the worker does not occupy a definite position, he can wage no struggle.
What's that again? Occupy a definite.
So this
I'm
is
not sure about that. But as far as the this guy that they mentioned,
Barakov.
which yeah had sympathy for Zionism. Well, of course he's kicked out of the goddamn party. Are you kidding? That's the easiest vote I'd ever have in my life. Of course he's kicked out. No, the Marxists and the Zionists were absolute enemies. Okay, this is what's so ridiculous about these clowns talking about the Jewish world as if it's one thing. You see, what a stupid! Yeah, you haven't they haven't graduated kindergarten. They don't know what they're talking about. Of course, the class struggle is everywhere, including in the Jewish, if you want to say, community, the Jewish world. The Rothschilds and the shoemakers. Okay. The Zionist nationalists would like to say are all one. The Marxists, we say, no, that's a false identity. You're a shoemaker. He's a trillionaire. It's not the same thing, regardless of your DNA.
Barakov argued that the Jewish class struggle in Russia was essentially hopeless and had to be postponed until there was a Jewish bourgeoisie. This was labor Zionism's dialectical contradiction. It sought to create a Jewish bourgeoisie in order to wage a struggle against it. Barakov's answer was immigration to Palestine. Jewish immigration must be transformed from immigration into colonization. It was precisely at this time that Jewish workers were becoming proletarialized. There was no reason other than religious mysticism for Jews immigrating to Palestine if all they wanted to do was escape anti Semitism. As the pogroms intensified, labor Zionist parties were drawn into the fight against anti Semitism. In Poland, Pole Zion split into right and left Pole Zion groups at its February-March 1919 conference, with LPZ emerging as much the stronger. This was the forerunner of the split at the World Union of Pole Zion's Fifth World Congress in Vienna in 1920. LPZ supported the Bolshevik Revolution and attended the Second and Third Congresses of the Communist International as observers. LPZ opposed the decision by PZ to rejoin the World Zionist Organization, WZO, viewing it as bourgeoisie. In Poland, LPZ was stronger than the right, whereas in Palestine the exact opposite was the case. Because of the rhythms of colonization, Palestine PZ gravitated to the right, whereas Pole Zion's diaspora sections were pulled to the left as a result of the class struggle and the fight against anti Semitism. In Russia, the success of the revolutionaries in overthrowing the Tsarist regime in February 1917 lessened the attraction of Zionism. At a stroke, all anti-Semitic legislation was abolished in the Petrograd Soviet by the Petrograd Soviet, sorry. As a front-page headline in the main party newspaper, Pravda put in 1918, to be against the Jews is to be for the Tsar. On June 22, 1917, the First Congress of Soviets passed unanimously a resolution on the struggle against anti-Semitism. At their conference in Petrograd in June 1917, the Russian Zionists omitted all mentions of British sponsorship of the Zionist settlement in Palestine. According to labor Zionists, the Jewish and Palestinian workers would unite against the Jewish bourgeoisie at the very same time that they were calling for a boycott of Arab labor. We can
Yeah.
see the results in Israel 2021-2022, where the ILP and Meretz Mapan entered into coalition between government with the far right.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, I'm gonna keep
Very
going.
nice analysis. And yeah, so labor Zionists or the Histadrut, which is their labor confederation. They're what you see. It's dialectics. You get to a fork in the road, and you need to go right or left. That's putting it simply. And of course, they go right for nationalism. See, nationalism is the essential problem. There are no nations in this world, as I've said before. I say, well, Dave, you're crazy. We get all kinds of nations. Well, I mean, as an authentic entity, okay? This is the psyop, if you like, of the 20th and 21st century. And if you don't have a nation, a Jewish nation, an Arab nation, American nation, no, you don't you're completely dangling in the wind. You don't have any bearings. Well, my nation is this universe, okay? And I'll tell you what, you'll come to that same understanding shortly or later. Your Congress, your flag, yeah, pledge allegiance to the flag. What kind of a dumbass would pledge allegiance to a fucking piece of fucking cloth? Huh? What kind of a dumbass? Well,
Yeah,
they made all of us dumbasses from grade one to adulthood. You see?
yeah, that's always so awkward. Um, I obviously don't pledge allegiance, and
Well, I bet you did in secondary.
well, when I was little, but now I don't. And then
Right. Now you've got
Karina,
something between your ears.
Karina's with me. We're watching a game or something at her school, and she's like, "Mom, you have to play." I'm like, "I'm not doing it." She's like, "You have to." I'm like, "Too
Well, that's
bad."
good. That's good.
But you
Yeah,
look around and people
your
are
allegiance to a
literally,
flag.
people are
Can't they say?
wait, people are getting like teary eyed. They're like so proud of their nation. They're like
Yeah. Well, when I
crying.
get my foot up their ass, they'll be more teary eyed. I don't truck with these people. Fuck them all. Fuck them all. You want to cross your heart, and you don't believe in anything. What is the pledge? It says equality and justice for
I
all.
pledge allegiance to the
You're
flag
the
of
last
the
person
United
that
States of
would ever
America,
stand up for any of that.
for which
What?
it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, Bellamy. Bellamy was pretty good. If you ever have a chance to do some reading, Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy, this had a great impact on me because he was a scientific socialist. But then amalgamating that with nationalism. Nationalism is the turd in the punch bowl. There are no nations. It's a myth. It's a fraud. And Bellamy, as a reformist socialist, he had his, in the 19th century, we had Bellamy societies all over the place, and of course, a Socialist Party and so on. Bellamy, read it, because it's simple common sense how you could organize a society based on human values and reason. It's very nice. It's a great novel. But he took the reform road, and this is nothing. You know, the capitalists are laughing at this crap.
Okay, I need a little break, do a few things. But listeners, next video, we will be reading Labor, Zionism, and Socialism. So stay tuned.
Well, that's very nice to actually read Greenstein because
I figured,
uh,
I mean, we should do some
eventually
stuff.
we'll get to reading the 650 pages,
Yeah,
656, and we'll all be up to speed. But I'm afraid we're going to lose some of our listeners. But
that's okay.
it's better than asking them to read it, you know.
That's
So a
okay.
good idea.
Let's read it. Okay. I'll see you in a bit.
Okay, bye.